Hi, everyone. Welcome to Classics You Slept Through. We're the book podcast where we read and discuss classic books. Today, we're actually going to be discussing a classic book that we have read. I'm your host, Kyle Davis, along with a girl who fully acknowledges that boys go to Mars to get more stars, or at least pretty girls, and girls go to Jupiter to get more stupider. My sister, Meredith. How's it going, Mer?
I think you had that backwards.
No, John Carter went to Mars, and he definitely got some stars.
He also upended an entire race in their political system and their atmosphere and everything.
Multiple, as we may see here. But yeah, today we are talking about said Mars, and we have just finished reading A Princess of Mars by Edgar Rice Burroughs, also known as John Carter, if you're a Disney aficionado. But the story of John Carter, who goes to Mars and has adventures. Written in 1912, serialized originally, and then compiled and published in 1917. This is considered a foundational Titan classic in the pulp sci-fi genre.
Mm-hmm.
And this was your first time reading it.
It was my first time reading it, and one of my favorite books, Fahrenheit 451, Ray Bradbury. Bradbury's a big fan and was highly influenced by Burroughs. In fact, called him hands down the most influential writer ever. Bar none.
Interesting.
Bar none.
Bradbury has some short stories in the public domain that we may have to do. And most of his works are obviously copyrighted, but he does have some public domain short story stuff we could do.
Yeah. You know what I wish we could do? I wish we could do Slaughterhouse-Five, because that's sci-fi. Have you read Slaughterhouse-Five?
I actually have never read any Vonnegut.
What?
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, other than his, wear sunscreen speech that is it actually him? I don't even know if it's attributed to him. His, graduation speech. No? You don't know that one?
No. I've read a lot of Vonnegut, but I have not heard of that. But you have to
look up his wear sunscreen speech.
You have to read Slaughterhouse-Five. You have to.
Huh?
Tralfamadorians, Kilgore Trout is basically probably Edgar Rice Burroughs fictionalized. And Kilgore Trout is a character who's a sci-fi writer in Slaughterhouse-Five, who writes about a guy who goes to a guy who
writes
goes
Princess of Mars.
Well, I mean, it's called Tralfamador and not Mars.
Not Barsoom.
No, not Barsoom. But anyway, you have to read it.
Okay, all right, I will take that under advisement. I'm actually reading a little bit more now because we do quiet reading at about 10 o'clock ish every day. So we all sit down in the living room for 30 minutes and everybody reads quietly. So we're sort of trying to build a reading habit each day.
Nice.
Yeah.
In addition to bedtime reading, which is aloud.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. Yeah, that's where I read aloud. Although I'm getting a break this time. Our next book, I got audiobook, so I'm gonna get to listen to. Yeah, I'm gonna listen as well.
Nice.
Which is very fun.
Yeah.
But anyway, today we're talking about A Princess of Mars, the story of John Carter, a Civil War Confederate officer who finds himself floating away to Mars, to this strange alien culture, meets savage warriors and beautiful princesses, has adventures, becomes the manliest men among men. And yeah, we finished the book.
Now, what do you think this book was about? Do you think it was...
That's deep.
What's Burroughs trying to tell us? Is it just a story? Fun little story?
Honestly, I don't know. When I think of it as summer blockbuster popcorn fiction, no deeper meaning, but perhaps there is. Do you think there's a deeper meaning to it?
No.
Oh, okay. You set up the question so well. I thought for sure you were coming in with some profound, this is what Burroughs is really saying here.
Well, I was reading actually a pretty good article in preparation for today, and it did strike me that this particular author, whose name is Alan Brown on tor.com, Tor.com, an article from 2019, made the point that Burroughs portrayed heroes who are not as we are, but as we wish to be. And I thought, do I wish to be this? Do men wish to be this? Do the readers of his book wish to be this? And what, this is skillful and brave and always does the right thing and never hesitates and will crawl to his last breath to save the planet. And incredibly humble. I don't know if John Carter's super humble, but sometimes he's like,
I don't think he's
if I were a smarter man, I wouldn't have been so brave.
he humble brags a lot. Yes, he definitely does that. I mean, it's definitely wish fulfillment fantasy, right? Because every character is a caricature, right? Like they're all the idealized versions of whatever it is. They're all hyper, whatever that trait of that character is. It's taken to the hyper extreme, right? So not only is John Carter, a fighting man of Virginia, but he is like the epitome of the bravery and dashing of the young martial class. He always talks about being a warrior is his only profession. It's his only thing that he can do, right? And he gets dumped onto a planet where literally the society is built around combat and around, talking about the Green Martians, where they fight and physical strength is the most valued thing. But they mix it with cruelty. And so John takes this idealized version of hyper masculinity, but he also blends it with that heart, that tender heart of, he becomes friends with Tarkus. He falls madly in love with Deja Thor, this princess, even though, on Earth, he was tempted many times, but never gave his heart to another on Earth, though he had time and inclination, but now
if I wanted to,
I could have, right? But now on Mars, he finds, the ideal woman. She is beautiful and yet brave and yet delicate and yet
egg-laying.
He wants to marry a hot chicken, yes. But no, like every trait that you would think of is brought to the extreme. And to the extent that I couldn't separate it from the time it was written, right? So this was written in 1912, a good 8 years before women could even vote in America. So even though he praises all of Deja's characteristics, still, she's not what we would call a feminist, right? Like she's not. There's no self-actualization. There's very little. She doesn't have much agency. I mean, she stands up and is proud before Talhages, and he's proud of her, but immediately she wilts into his arms as his delicate Deja.
It's interesting that you say that because, again, I was reading this article that remarks that much of Burroughs' writing is racist, as it is when you find the public domain stuff, because people were not, white people weren't kind or woke or anything like that. Well, that's not fair to say, but I'm going to go ahead and clump them all together. But the Barsoomian stories, so said this author, seems not to be as apparent. I guess because people are red and green and they're Martians and they fight with each other. But he says that while Deja Thor has a primary role in the story as a love interest, she is remarkably independent, outspoken, with plenty of agency. And so you disagree.
Really? I mean, the only indication of that I can see is, well, I mean, she rejects him, I guess is that feminist agency?
She
Where he,
rejects him because he said the wrong thing, and she's like, didn't say the right thing. Like, he
right,
called me this and didn't know what he was saying, and so she gives him the cold shoulder, which I don't know,
right.
feels
Even then, she's
stereotypical.
like demurely blushing and flat, like, oh, I can't believe you called me his princess, in the beginning.
And she's all like, well, if you don't know what you did, I'm not telling you.
Right,
Like,
exactly. So, I mean, is that agency? And again, like I said, the only other instance I can recall is her standing up to Talhages and sort of, I am granddaughter of the Jedak, blah, blah, blah. So that's the only
yeah.
other time she sort of has a spine.
And that could have gotten her killed. Right?
I read another sort of critique of this, not critique, but in defense of what you're saying. Like, oh no, of course Burroughs was a feminist and she was a strong character. It alludes to the battle at the palace of Zendanga, where, interestingly, and this is where I find this interesting. So the author I was reading, apologize for not having a citation, but he was saying, in the battle of Zendanga at the palace, she fought side by side with John Carter, which I think if we think about what was happening in the action, that could be implied. I don't think Burroughs ever says that Deja fought, shoulder to shoulder with John. But then if we contrast that with the actual depiction of that scene in the book, which if you're watching this on YouTube or Twitch, you can see it's the cover of the book. It's as I stood before the golden throne fighting for my Deja Thoris. And we see John Carter.
Yeah.
Right. She's cowering behind John Carter as he's standing there with a sword or a whip or whatever he's holding there. It's maybe a rapier. I don't know. It sort of looks like a flimsy sword. And he's got his arm sort of holding her back. Like, I will protect you, as he's fighting off these hordes.
She's covered in too many silks to be of any use.
No, that's actually accurate, right? Because this is her marriage thing, so she was wrapped up.
Oh yeah, the shroud.
Right, and John leapt in right as they were right. So maybe they only got to her getting her face off, and John leapt in at that moment when he realized it was her.
Because they're always naked anyway.
Right. I mean, John's wearing pants. He shouldn't be wearing pants.
Could you call those pants? They're more like
skirt
jorts. I don't know.
He's not wearing much, but he is wearing all of his metal and his trappings, so that's good.
Well, I don't think she has that much. Well, what do we define as agency when you actually have a say over things and you can have control over your own life and destiny and stuff like that? And she doesn't, because she has to adhere to all of these customs. Everyone has to adhere to the customs.
Correct.
But then that not adhering to customs marks you as, I think, somebody who has more agency. Like, you decide for yourself. And that's what, feminists and others, social activists and civil rights leaders, that they defy custom to work for something better, and she does not. They might be asking too much of Deja Thor.
Right. For thousands of years.
But not John Carter, new guy, waltzes in and upends everything. Right?
Right. So this is, I'm probably woefully undereducated to discuss this, but recently been reading a book on race in America and sort of the split, especially within the. It's a book focused on the split in religion in America between races, right?
Okay.
And one of the things they point out, and I'm applying this to John Carter here, and Burroughs in his writings, sort of in the idea of, was Burroughs racist? It just struck me that Burroughs is, so the book posits that white folk in America generally, well, anyone in America views race and conditions in America through whatever tools you have in your tool bag, right? Like you can only understand things through the lens of what you have available to you, right? And predominantly within the white American church, the predominant tool that you have in the toolkit is this sort of individualism, basically, like your individual choices and your individual actions make up society, basically, right? So it's the idea of white Christians in America, they don't see racism as a problem because they don't see it as a systemic thing. They see it as bad actors. They see it as individual people making individual bad decisions. And the way to fix the problem is not through systemic societal change, but through individual person-to-person contact and changing people's hearts one at a time.
Effective.
Basically. Right. Whereas Black Americans have a different toolkit and they see it more as a systemic societal thing, as a more of a collective, right? Okay. So that idea, I see that here in Burroughs, where, you were saying a lot of the writers at the time were racist. Was Burroughs also, he kind of abstracts it by taking us to Mars, and we have the green Martians and the red Martians, and it's not, but he kind of does, right? So he's looking at it. The green Martians, he condemns as a race, basically, except for he sees individual examples in Tars Tarkas and Sola of, so he's almost using that individual toolkit on, well, I've taught Tars Tarkas friendship, and that's how we've changed green Martian society, like one person at a time. But he's still saying, I think, on a larger scale, green Martian society is still bad. Right.
A racist viewpoint. Yeah, it's lesser than.
Right.
But this
Except
person,
for the noble Tars Tarkas, who, and now he can lead his people to a brighter future because we found like the one green savior.
I'm not racist. I have a green friend.
Precisely, right. I mean, me and Tars are buddies, right? Like, I don't want to just casually wipe out tribes of Warhoons and other Martians in a search for Deja Thor because I'm friends with Tars Tarkas. I'm cool. Right?
Tars will stick up for my casual genocide. It's fine.
Exactly.
That's really...
So, I mean, that's kind of where I was looking at it.
I think that that's a really... So while it's not some sort of virulent, hateful racism, it still is.
Right, exactly. It's I'm not racist. I don't hate green Martians, but you are still categorizing green Martians as a savage, destructive people with no culture, and they just squat in buildings, and they don't build anything, and they don't provide anything to society. They're sort of parasitical off of, yes, they understand not to attack the atmosphere factory because that would kill us all, but they're certainly not building their own atmosphere factories or providing labor to make sure the atmosphere factory is running, or
they don't contribute.
Right, they're not contributing.
I've had this type of conversation a lot about quote unquote racism in books, because sometimes, and it's mostly woke white folks who mean really well, look at a character in a book who is not white, and that character might be doing something that represents their culture, like if it's a Chinese character eating Chinese food or wearing traditional Chinese clothes and has an accent. And then they see that and they say, oh, racist. And I've had a conversation so many times, like, step back. First of all, what's the definition of racism and racist? Okay, now that we've got that on the table, let's take a look at the character. What do we see them doing, saying? What are they contributing? And in the times that I've had these conversations, the character actually is a full-fledged, well-formed character who is deeply meaningful to the other characters, plays a big part, and is not a caricature of anything. And the problem that I always found with that, first of all, is that a lot of times people are like, I don't accept it. He has an accent. And I'm like, so are you now in favor of whitewashing? Do people not have accents? Is that not a part of who they are? Would you not have an accent? Would you to go somewhere? And there's a difference between like trying to write an accent and of course caricaturizing and like
making fun of.
Yeah, exactly.
Demeaning. Yeah.
And so I feel like some people swing a pendulum really far the other direction, where it's almost like you can't have multiple races in a book and you can't have them represent or enact parts of their culture, especially like an immigrant character. Otherwise, it's racist simply because they are there. People who read more deeply often, they don't have that issue. I'm not being judgy about people who read deeply versus don't, but I kind of am. But I find that interesting about the Tarkus and I almost called him Julius, John Carter's character, because neither of them really are that deep in any way.
No.
Tars, though, might be.
He may be the deepest character in the book.
Yeah, he's got like internal conflict and struggle, and
right.
And there's not much internal conflict or struggle with John Carter. He always seems to know the right thing to do at the right time, and will just does it.
Right. Or he'll retroactively say, I was scared for my life and didn't know if I was doing the right thing, but it all worked out. Like if there's any conflict or struggle, it goes away within a sentence.
And I find that hard to identify with a character like that, because if you say, I was scared and I didn't know if I did the right thing, but I did it anyway and it all worked out, that's not actually dealing with the way humans feel about doing the right thing. And if it's end up being difficult and actually living in that space of like, what do I do?
Right.
And that's why I guess it's wish fulfillment, because you wish you could just do it.
Everything just works out.
Yeah.
Right. You have superpowers, basically. You are stronger, you are faster, you are better than everyone around you. And with those skills, it works out. You're able, whatever. At every point in this book, when John Carter needed to do something, he was immediately able to do it. Mm-hmm. When he needed to get away from the Green Martians, when he first arrived on Mars, he found he could leap and he could suddenly get away. When his life was threatened, he found that he was so much stronger, and punching a Green Martian immediately solved his problem. Luckily, he was among a society where killing the person who attacked you actually earned you accolades instead of, approbation. So, luckily he was among them. And then, we can go on down the list. Every time he needed to do something, well, it's a good thing he met Cantos Can, because that guy knew how to get him into the Air Scouts and knew how to open the gates of Zendanga and knew how to help him navigate, helped him take his tests. And, at every point, John Carter immediately was able. He had to get out of the atmosphere factory. And fortunately, he could trick the guy into thinking about the tones. And fortunately, he could read the guy's mind. And he could immediately memorize these alien Martian tones. And he could immediately reproduce them perfectly.
And no one could read his mind. Thank goodness.
No one could read his mind, right, because he was not of Barsoom. And at the end of the book, when he needed to save Martian society, he suddenly remembered that he knew the tones and could recall them 9 years later and could quickly get out there. And he was able to fly. He had a flying skill, and he's never flown before. This book was written before airplanes were mass produced. Like, Edgar Rice Burroughs probably has never been on an airplane when he's writing this book, right?
I don't know. I would assume
1912. When was the Wright brothers' flight? I think it was probably about this time, wasn't it?
We can find out. I know it was. That's like the Wright brothers' flight.
Right. But fortunately, John Carter lands on a planet where they have these one-man flyers that I guess is just like riding a horse. And so he is able to jump on it. And of course, he has wonderful horsemanship skill because he is, the epitome of the Virginia fighting man. And he's able to dash off and do these things. So.
1903.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I stand corrected then.
But still,
I doubt he's been on an airplane.
Right.
He probably has not been on an airplane.
Right. When you put it that way, the book sounds absurd.
It does, doesn't it?
What's it say?
Why would you read this?
What's it say about wish fulfillment that you can murder someone and not get in trouble? Man, I wish I could just kill anyone.
Well, not just not get in trouble, but get raised in status because of it. You get to take their stuff. You get to take their women. You get their job. Like, think about it.
Someone's angry and brooding at home.
Exactly. That's I almost call this like incel lit, you know, because it's
I was thinking that.
Yeah, I mean it's like this is like everything I've ever wanted. I can get the beautiful princess. You know, all the women on Earth reject me, but on Mars there's a beautiful princess and I can go claim her.
Just win her.
Right. Because it's not like John Carter worked out a lot, right? Like he just landed on Mars and was suddenly strong, right? Like what we're saying basically is like a 5-year-old kid could wind up on Mars
and be stronger
and be strong and have superhuman strength, right?
Our kids would love that.
Exactly.
Hulk smash all morning. God.
They'd be on a murderous rampage if I raised them correctly.
God. I did read, though, that based on the science that they had at the time and what they thought, Burroughs isn't far off from what they thought was scientifically accurate for Mars.
Yes.
They thought, like, the atmosphere might be thinner, but probably breathable. And that, what else? Like, they thought that maybe inhabitants constructed canals on this dry planet and whatnot. So there used to be rivers, which, you know, there very well might used to have been. Like the River Is might just be on Mars. Maybe that's where you go when you die. You go to Mars.
It could be.
You go to Barsoom. But what you said, why would you read this? Why did you read this? You read this on your own, just as a person, a podcastless person.
I did. Are there any of those in America still?
Podcastless people.
We have to take up a collection for the podcast list. Why did I read it originally? I think I read this back in 2003. Did I? No.
Wow, you weren't even like a teenager.
What?
You weren't even like a teenager. You're just a normal adult. And you picked up this book.
I definitely was not a teenager in 2003.
No, far from it.
No, I was trying to think if that's when I read it. I don't think so. I read it on my Kindle, so I would have gotten it like 2009-ish.
I don't even know when Kindles began to exist.
I think I got mine in 2009. I want to say maybe 8. Cause I think I bought it for grad school because I put a lot of my grad school books on it. You know, I don't know why I got it. Maybe I was just looking for, because it was long before the movie came out, so it's not like I read it because of the movie, unless I did.
Oh, maybe.
Know. It could have been. It could have, because the movie came out in 2012. So maybe I heard about this movie and was like, "Oh, what's this? A public
Well, that's when you
book?
were in grad school, right?
It was, and I had more time. That may have been when I read it, honestly. That makes sense. Now that we've taken 5 minutes of the podcast to figure out when I read this book, going through my reading history and my Kindle acquisition timeline, riveting stuff, I'm sure. But yeah, I probably read it in grad school, about 2010, 2011, somewhere in there.
So why? Just because of the movie, maybe?
Probably because there was some promotional stuff for the movie coming out, and I saw that it was based on this book. I think I may have heard of it prior to that, honestly, just in reading sci-fi, because I think a lot of sci-fi writers cite Burroughs as an influence, as we kind of discussed earlier. And so I got them and I started reading them. And I actually, full disclosure, I started rereading the second book.
Just now?
Just a few days ago after we finished the podcast, just to see how does John get back to Mars, because obviously he gets back to Mars.
Oh, tell us. How does he get back?
I think he just basically just shows up there one day. Yeah, he just keeps praying on Mars and just, it's not like he does anything. He just kind of shows up. But a lot of the stuff that I was thinking about, like, so I because these books are all so similar, there's kind of very little to distinguish them. They sort of flow into each other. if you are interested in, Burroughs really expands the world building of Barsoom in the next book. So, in this book, in Princess of Mars, we've got the Green Martians, the Red Martians, and we have one scene with the White Apes. We really get more into, I don't know, the cosmology and the religion of Mars and things like that.
Interesting.
And I think Burroughs has. I have never read anything about Burroughs himself, any biographies or anything. I would be curious, based on, his views of religion, especially based on the second book, and his views on other cultures, obviously, and how they view other religions. Because, in this book, he really kind of alludes to this, the river Is, where my forefathers have gone. Well, in the second book, he breaks it down, basically, and we see what the river is, and we see what's there, and we see what happens to Martians when they go off to the river Is, basically.
Do they die? I don't want to read the book. I want you just to tell me.
And there's nothing mystical about it. There's like these other aliens there that basically kill them and eat them or something.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's not like religious mysticism. It's like, oh yeah, there's some dudes there and they kill you and eat you.
But nobody knows that till you arrive at Is.
Right.
Then you're like, oh, this is what's happening.
Right. I mean, the second book is appropriately enough called Gods of Mars. So,
of which John Carter is one. Eventually?
No, but he basically, I think, exposes that these gods of Mars aren't really gods. They're just dudes that are kind of running the show behind the scenes, sort of thing.
Oh.
Yeah.
Like the lizard people or whatever.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Fair enough. The only thing I know about John Burroughs is that he was born in 1875, so he grew up around a lot of Southern Civil War Confederate veterans, just telling their stories, and so I guess
his dad was a Union veteran, as we discussed.
Interesting. Did we discuss that?
Yeah, we talked about that in our first episode on the book.
So then, what is the allure with the Confederacy? Like, why? I don't.
That's a great question. I mean, I'm a Northern boy. I don't get it.
I don't get it either. And I was a Civil War reenactor, and I don't get it. You were,
and you don't get it. Maybe some of our Southern listeners can enlighten us. What is the draw? We as Northerners, we don't get it. We just see
slaveholding losers.
Slaveholders that decided to break off because they wanted to keep holding slaves.
Yeah.
And the North was like, we don't really want to keep doing this too much longer.
I mean, there's the allure of like the gallant Southern brave gentleman, but that's every soldier is supposed to be gallant and brave, and so.
I mean, is it a mythos? So I would be curious in a historian telling us, like, did this Southern gallantry mythos exist pre-Civil War, or was it retroactively applied to confer honor upon losing, basically, and finding like grace and honor and something of value in the loss to help cope? That's what I'd be curious in discussing with a historian.
Because among other things, the South is known for their hospitality and their friendliness and their kindness. Right. Did that exist prior, or did they decide to make that?
I don't know.
Like, did that idea about the South exist, or suddenly, no, we're so kind down here. Come on in, have some grits.
Right. I mean, my impression is these stereotypes of, as they say, the antebellum South, right? The post-war South. Like, it was all applied, that's my impression anyway, to sort of assuage the loss. Like, yes, but look at this wonderful period of time. That nostalgic looking back. I don't know. Yeah.
If you're white, look at this wonderful period of
time. Sure. Of course. Of course.
Different view. Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
Definitely.
I don't get, having been a young girl walking through the Confederate side of the reenactment camp, I can tell you I did not find very many gallant Gentleman. In fact, quite the opposite. It
Very
was a
nice.
little fearful. Like, I have to walk to what side of the? Oh, I have to walk through them. Okay, it's like walking by construction workers when you're
Yeah.
in the city. That's what it felt like, and I was young, but I was with
Now, were
a larger
reenactment
group.
units regionalized?
Yeah.
So, like, all the Confederate reenactors would be from Confederate states.
Well, no, I mean you could join whatever you wanted.
Sure.
And pretend you are. Like, I think I was in, our group was the 27th Pennsylvania Infantry. So from my perspective, yeah, we were all from that
You're all from
general,
Pennsylvania.
well, Hagerstown too.
Okay.
And like the general, here is a Civil War group and we're representing this part of the war. And this is where you live and it's the closest one.
Like,
So-
were there any Confederate-based unit or Pennsylvania-based units that were Confederate?
I don't know. I don't know, honestly. If you lived in Pennsylvania and wanted to join a Confederate group, you probably would need
Have to
to
drive to
Maryland or Virginia. Yeah. I mean, we definitely had people in our group who, because of the group they joined, were fighting in the Union, though their attitudes and their and their personalities and their proclivities lent to the Southern side. And if there had been a Confederate group, I think probably would have picked that. And some people had multiple, like people who were really into it had multiple outfits, and you get to know people. And it's like, oh, today I'm going to put on this outfit. I'm going to go join Robert and his group, and I'm just going to be on that side today. But there was like registration and stuff to,
Yeah.
and I, you know, I was like 13, 11, 12, 13. So I don't know, like, did you have to register if you were going to join another group just to have a count? Because stuff was organized. There was choreography to
Right.
the battles and stuff.
Sure.
For the most part, I think people would get real mad if you decided not, like you're like, I'm going to survive this battle and I'm just not going to fall.
Not to.
And people would be like, and so-and-so just wouldn't fall. Clearly, he would have been shot. Like, go
You were
down.
supposed to die.
Yeah.
Wow.
I was at the reenact. I don't remember what year it was, but we did Hers Ridge up in Gettysburg, and that was the year two people died. One person got hit with an actual
What?
bullet.
Like somebody loaded their gun for real?
I don't know if it was like a piece of the gun.
What?
Yeah. And somebody had a heart attack because it was so hot.
Well, yeah. Yeah, a lot of those guys are not in the best of shape.
No, they certainly didn't look like starving Civil War soldiers.
Yeah.
Some of them.
Full disclaimer, just to keep ourselves safe. We are not suggesting that all Southerners were racist during the Civil War, nor are we suggesting that no Northerners were. Obviously, many people in the North were quite still racist because that was the prevailing racial attitude at the time. Yeah. So, anyway, history can be problematic, but we don't solve it by not acknowledging it and not looking at history for what it was.
Truth.
Anyway,
Truth.
right. Truth is important. All right. Anything else we want to talk about?
I thought this book was really fun to read. I don't know if I would have ever read it on my own and enjoyed it, but reading it aloud was really fun, and talking about it was fun.
Yeah. I mean, I think really, and this is just a general tip, I think, for all of our listeners, reading things aloud, you really get more out of the book, and you really get to see, because as I said, I read this years and years ago, and I thought, going into this read aloud, my impression was, oh yeah, this is a fun book, it's good, it's enjoyable, it's exciting, it's got action. Reading it aloud, you're like, oh, this is kind of hokey and corny. I don't know if this is great writing. It's interesting, I don't know. Mm-hmm. Anyway, it allows you to kind of slow down a little bit and pick things apart. And I've done that with other books that I've read silently, and kind of, because you sort of, when you read to yourself silently, you sort of not breeze through it, but you definitely elide over things and you read quickly, and you fill in the gaps in your mind. Whereas when you're reading aloud, you're slowing your brain down because you have to connect now your brain to your mouth to produce the sounds, and that's a second modality that you're employing. And I think you really grasp more of it sometimes. If that makes sense.
I think yeah, because you have to vocalize it. You have to actually say it. So you have to use your intonation, and you have to put, like, you inevitably start to, I think, say it the way they would say, and you add emphasis and stuff.
Right.
So like reading, I sub-vocalize when I read in my head, and I learned not everybody does that. Do you do that? Do you say the words in your brain when you read?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I've got like an actual narration in my head, but I would not have like read the blood of Virginia coursed through my veins, and then, you know, like how John Carter gets himself all amped up to go grab the flyer and go speeding away. Like, I would have read it more demurely. Yeah. And this way I'm like, oh, I had to read it really exuberantly, which made it more fun. But also, as you said, kind of pointed out that it was a little cheesy. And
yeah, I think when I'm reading it silently, I read the fighting blood of Virginia boiled in my veins, and I had to go do this thing. And I think reading silently, you're focusing on the thing that he's doing. Whereas when you're reading it aloud, you're reading, and then, you know, the fighting blood of Virginia, and you're like, what is happening? Come on, man. Like, you're a cheese ball, the fighting blood of Virginia. Sure. Okay, buddy. You know, so it's, yeah, you definitely get a different feel of it reading it aloud.
Yeah. I think I stayed awake though. Although in the beginning I was like, I don't know, this might be a slept through, but no.
I stayed awake.
I did. It paid off.
It is action packed, right? There's enough action to keep you awake. And I think it moves quickly enough, and it doesn't bog itself down. Like,
no.
It almost jumps a little too quickly. But yeah, I would give this one, I don't know if I'd stayed awake for this one. I think I was like half awake.
All right.
In my second read.
So we should have like a rating system, like Z's or something. Like the more Z's you get, the more asleep you are. So like I gave it like 2 out of 5 Z's. I was a little bit awake.
This is one I was reading while watching TV. We'll put it that way.
You've also read it before.
Like, I'd also read it before, true. I wasn't like riveted to it. But
yeah, like, fair.
Oh, okay.
Fair. You know. All right. So sleepy, bleary-eyed awake.
A bleary-eyed awake, right. It's a book you read when you're in bed and you're ready to fall asleep, and if you miss a page or two, it doesn't really matter.
Fair.
Just keep on trucking.
All right. Agreed.
Excellent. All right, well, that closes out A Princess of Mars by Edgar Rice Burroughs. What did you guys think out there? Please hit us up on our social media. We are at CYSTpod on Twitter, the Facebook, Instagram, and Twitch. You can watch us on Twitch. twitch.tv/CYSTpod. You can send us an email, cystpod@gmail.com, and you can like and subscribe on YouTube and watch these wonderful discussion videos as well. So please also go do that. You can just search for us on YouTube, search for Classics You Slept Through, because until we get enough subscribers, we can't get a custom URL. Hint, hint. Anyway, please also rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, because that's how folks find the show. It also helps us, gives us some feedback, helps us, what are we doing right, what are we doing wrong?
I don't really want to know what we're doing wrong. You could keep that to yourself.
No, I'll read those. I'll read what we're doing wrong. I want to know what we're doing wrong. But we have finished a book, Mare, so that means we've got a new book next week.
New book day. Or next week. Or
actually, I guess, technically when you're listening to this, if you're listening to this in the podcast feed, tomorrow. You'll probably get this tomorrow. So
yeah, if you're on Twitch, you're gonna have to wait.
It'll be a few days. Yeah, if you're watching us live, it'll be a few days, but it'll be next week in that case. But what's our next book, Mare?
We are reading the classic Oscar Wilde, The Picture of Dorian Gray.
Dun dun dun. Have you read this before?
I have.
You have? Oh,
I have
not.
It's been a while, and I read it I listened. I guess I've never read it. I've listened to it. I listened to it. Well, at the gym. So,
Half paying attention.
yeah, maybe. But also, like, I feel like it's a weird thing to listen to a book while on like the elliptical, and you're like trying to go at it, but you're also just.
Yes. I find I have to listen. The only podcasts I can listen to at the gym are ones that I can only give like 50% attention to. Like I can't listen to like political podcasts that I'm interested in what they're saying. So I generally listen to like basketball or something a little lighter. But yeah.
But I think you're gonna like this one. I think I'm gonna
Okay.
really like the second read through.
Okay. Do we need to tell the listeners anything, or just let them go in cold? Like I don't even know what this is. This is mystery. It's
a little, maybe there's a little mystery to it, a little horror, maybe.
Okay. It's
There's
like
some
supernatural-ish or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Supernatural. Unexplainable events.
Okay. I am going in pretty much cold. Like I literally know nothing.
Really? Nothing.
Yeah, nothing. I have never read any Oscar Wilde. I think he's funny, right? Is that the impression? Is that the correct? He's witty.
Sure.
No?
Yeah.
Is he? I don't even know. So my impression is that he's a witty, comical, sort of male-ish Jane Austen, like wry humor. Is that? I don't know.
Yes, I think.
Okay.
I mean, The Importance of Being Earnest, I think, is pretty funny.
Okay.
And hold on, I want to make sure I'm even saying this right. It is Oscar Wilde, right?
Well, yeah, it is.
Yeah. Okay. Phew. I thought for a minute I was wrong.
That's like his famous work.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, which one? Importance of Being Earnest or Picture of Dorian Gray?
Well, I think Importance of Being Earnest is his probably most known, right? If you say the name Oscar Wilde, that's what I would have said.
Yeah. He's got a. I mean, he's a pretty famous poet, author, writer. He's an Irish poet, author, writer. But you're right. His wit, his realism, and his rich characters and social and political critique make for lasting and wonderful plays. So
well, there you go. So this will be my first read of anything by his. So I'll be
and this is not a play.
It is not. Okay.
No. I think that would be hard to do.
I actually did start reading a little bit last night. I was in the first chapter.
So you do know something.
I started reading. I read the preface, which was incomprehensible. I was too late at night to understand the preface. It was anyway, and then the first chapter just kind of started rolling a little bit, and I fell asleep. So,
well, we're going back to our Gothic. We've read a lot of Gothic stuff
because that's what's in public domain.
Yeah, well,
you got to read the old stuff, right? That's what's out there.
So we'll see how it stacks up to our previous Gothic. I'm sure we'll see some pretty similar tropes. We'll be able to talk about Northanger. We'll be able to talk about Dracula.
Well, because this is later, because he was a contemporary of Bram Stoker's. Isn't that what we determined during Dracula? So this is like late 1800s. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is like 1890.
Yeah. So I think they were friends and contemporaries, I believe. They ran in the same circles.
That's cool. I like finding out famous people hang out together.
Yeah.
We're like work buddies. Of
course. I mean, you hang out in your social circles that, anyway.
Yeah.
Don't intersect. All right. Well, anything else before we wrap up? Oh, chapter 3 through. We're going to read for next episode. It's going to be a picture of Dorian Gray up through chapter 3. So the first 3 chapters is what we're reading. Okay.
Stop at chapter 4.
Do not start chapter 4.
Right.
I mean, you can read ahead. Sure, go ahead. But we're not going to talk through chapter 4.
You can do what you want. Episode. Yeah.
All right, so until next time, this has been Classic You Slept Through. Please go see Mrs. Johnson and pick up your tardy slip, because I think y'all were late this morning.
Peace.
All right, bye.